On August 19, 1944, deep within the subterranean bunkers of the Wehrmacht headquarters in East Prussia, Hitler's Wolfschanz, General Oberst Alfred Jodl meticulously reviewed intelligence from a hemorrhaging Western Front. His staff had completed the mathematical calculation that underpinned German defensive strategy. Allied supply lines now stretched precariously over 400 miles from the Normandy beaches, unable to keep pace with General Patton's spearheading Third Army. Jodl knew, based on the immutable laws of mechanized warfare, that the Americans had critically outrun their logistics. An advancing armored division consumed a staggering 150,000 gallons of fuel daily when committed to an advance. With their supply depots 400 miles distant, the conclusion was inescapable. Patton's Third Army must grind to an immediate halt within days, perhaps hours, buying the Wehrmacht precious time to regroup along the Seine River, perhaps holding out until the winter snows. This confidence was not born of wishful thinking, but of decades of bitter military experience and observation. The Wehrmacht, which had pioneered blitzkrieg and revolutionized combined arms warfare, understood intimately the tyranny of the supply chain. Their own catastrophic campaigns had repeatedly stalled when logistics failed to match tactical success. In the vastness of Russia, the advance foundered not primarily due to early Soviet resistance, but because of the simple inability to supply forces across immense distances. German trucks frequently broke down on poor Russian roads, and the military relied on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of its transport, a speed wholly incompatible with Panzer spearheads. Moreover, railway gauge differences meant vital material piled up hundreds of miles from front lines. General der Panzertruppe Heinrich von Luttwitz, who would command the 47th Panzer Corps shortly thereafter, in September 1944, had written in July, "The Americans face the same logistical impossibility we face in Russia. Their mechanical advantage becomes a disadvantage. Machines require fuel, ammunition, parts." What Jodl and the entire German general staff failed to account for was the radical audacity of American improvisation. Just 125 miles away, an unprecedented logistical operation was already in motion. Headlights defiantly blazing against military blackout doctrine, 5,958 trucks were rolling eastward in an endless convoy. This was the Red Ball Express, a supply system so vast and relentless, carrying 12,500 tons of material every 24 hours, that German military science had never conceived it possible. This organization was about to shatter every assumption about mechanized warfare. Within 72 hours, Patton supposedly immobilized tanks would crash violently through German positions at the Seine. Within a week, Paris would be liberated. Within a month, the American forces would stand menacingly at the German border. The finest military minds of the Wehrmacht were receiving a harsh, immediate lesson in the power of American industrial logistics, a lesson delivered by 23,000 truck drivers, 75% of them African American, who transformed a one-way highway system into the most efficient military supply line in the history of warfare. The sheer velocity of the Allied breakout had propelled Patton's Third Army 400 miles in barely 30 days. Yet, history dictates the inevitable consequence of such speed: logistical paralysis. German intelligence services, tracking the American advance with meticulous precision, understood the mathematics of consumption. A single Sherman tank, they calculated, burned fuel at the rate of 0.5 miles per gallon on paved roads, a figure that dropped sharply when traversing cross-country terrain. The logistical demands were staggering. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies daily, while a mechanized armor division devoured 1,000 tons. Patton commanded 12 divisions, sweeping forward across a 60-mile front. The resulting calculation was mathematically irrefutable. 12,000 tons of material were required every day, transported across a 400-mile distance from the Normandy beaches via damaged infrastructure and a transportation network the retreating Wehrmacht had systematically annihilated. General Major Siegfried Westphal, who would soon serve as Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, formalized this analysis on August 20th. He concluded that even if the Americans somehow possessed unlimited trucks, which they decidedly did not, and perfect roads, which were non-existent and suffered no mechanical failures, an operational impossibility, they could not sustain Patton's unprecedented momentum for more than another 48 hours. Physical laws, Westphal asserted, could not be violated, not even by the prodigious output of American industry. Against this backdrop of impending collapse, at 2 p.m. on August 25, 1944, in a requisitioned French chateau near the town of Lay, Lieutenant Colonel Loren Ayres of the Motor Transport Service faced a room filled with skeptical logistics officers. The data they presented was stark and undeniable. Patton's Third Army was consuming supplies at a rate unmatched by any fighting force in history, advancing at speeds that utterly defied established logistical planning. Traditional supply methods, reliance on newly repaired railway transport, scheduled convoys, and depot-to-depot distribution, had utterly collapsed under the immense operational strain. Gentlemen, Ayres announced, cutting to the pessimism, we are going to create a continuous one-way highway system stretching from Cherbourg and the landing beaches straight to the front lines. Every single vehicle will run 20 hours out of every 24. There will be no stopping except for essential fuel and emergencies. We will move 12,500 tons daily minimum. The concept drew its name from American railway terminology. A red ball freight was an express shipment granted absolute priority over all other traffic. The resulting Red Ball Express would operate under the same principle. Absolute priority, zero delays, and no exceptions. The technical specifications of the plan completely defied conventional German military doctrine. It mandated two parallel one-way highways, one dedicated exclusively to loaded trucks moving forward, and the other reserved solely for empty vehicles returning. Operations would run 24 hours a day, abandoning strict blackout discipline, with headlights blazing across the darkened countryside. The policy was no stop, except for critical fuel resupply or mechanical failure. Convoys were spaced at tight 5-minute intervals, maintaining an aggressive 35-mile-per-hour average speed. To ensure continuity, mobile maintenance units were stationed every 50 miles, and military police checkpoints were empowered to summarily remove any vehicle that dropped below 25 miles per hour. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, commanding the Advanced Section Communication Zone ADSEC, reviewed the projected numbers, which called for 140 truck companies and a minimum of 5,958 vehicles operating at an almost impossible 90% availability rate. That is impossible by any logistics textbook ever written, he conceded. Yet, in a display of organizational genius, the impossible was rendered operational within 36 hours. On August 26, 1944, drivers, including those from the 3916 Quartermaster Truck Company, climbed into their vehicles, initiating the most vital supply line in the history of mechanized warfare. The vital cargo, 105mm artillery shells destined for Patton's rapid armored advance near Metz, 300 miles to the east, was loaded onto ubiquitous GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, affectionately known by the troops as a deuce and a half. The sheer demographic makeup of the Red Ball Express, however, represented profound irony that would have certainly bewildered German racial ideologues. Of the 23,000 drivers eventually staffing the route, an extraordinary 75% were African-American soldiers. These men, serving within a strictly segregated army, often denied basic rights like eating in white restaurants or using public facilities across much of their own nation, were the indispensable force ensuring the momentum of the most celebrated American generals. Within hours of operation, the drivers forged a distinct improvisational culture. Their vehicles became moving billboards adorned with defiant slogans. Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, or the ambitious Detroit to Berlin Express. They established ruthless internal traffic rules. Slower vehicles were instantly pulled aside. Trucks suffering mechanical failure were summarily pushed into ditches, and any vehicle moving below 20 miles per hour was deemed an unacceptable roadblock to be bypassed immediately. By August 28, 1944, German reconnaissance units began transmitting reports of an unprecedented logistical spectacle. Units from Aufklärungsabteilung 116, radioing from positions overlooking the main Red Ball route, observed continuous vehicle column, headlights visible for 20 kilometers, no spacing, no blackout discipline, estimate 1,000 vehicles per hour. Americans have abandoned all military precaution. This operational recklessness defied the fundamental principles of German military doctrine. Headlights at night invited deadly air attack. Continuous, unbroken columns presented ideal targets for mass artillery. An elimination of spacing meant a single disabled truck could paralyze an entire convoy. Yet, the Americans proceeded seemingly unconcerned by these risks. The growing alarm culminated on August 30th when General Lieutenant Edgar Feuinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Ball Express from concealed vantage points. His subsequent report to Army Group B headquarters captured the German bewilderment. The enemy operates a supply system beyond our comprehension. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without pause. They don't hide, don't disperse. Don't follow any rules we understand. It's not military science. It's mass production applied to warfare. The core difference lay in logistic philosophy. Where German doctrine prioritized concealment and the careful conservation of vehicles, the Americans embraced sheer volume, assuming a 20% mechanical failure rate and planning for continuous improvisation rather than adherence to strict military procedure. The statistical outcome of the Red Ball Express shattered all German calculations of logistical possibility. In its inaugural week, August 25th to 31st, 1944, the route delivered 89,939 tons of supplies, averaging 12,848 tons daily, over a 686-mile round-trip distance. This required 5,958 trucks, each completing an average of 1.5 trips per day. When German logistics specialists intercepted American documents detailing the operational fuel consumption of the Red Ball Express, a staggering 300,000 gallons daily, they immediately dismissed the figures as crude propaganda. Yet, these numbers were not only authentic, they were accelerating, revealing a logistical scale that defied continental European experience. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had established a mechanical rhythm utterly incomprehensible to German logistics officers, 80% of whose transport remained reliant upon slow, vulnerable horse-drawn wagons. The American effort was an industrialized torrent. Convoys, averaging 67 vehicles, departed the western terminus every 5 minutes, standard loads hitting 5 tons, frequently pushed to 7 tons. Covering the 350-mile one-way distance required 14 hours, with a rapid 2-hour turnaround at either end, ensuring that 5,000 vehicles were in constant, grinding motion at any given moment. The Red Ball Express became a crucible of innovation, generating solutions hourly as drivers and mechanics solved problems that German military science deemed structurally insurmountable. When trucks inevitably failed, at a rate of approximately 1,800 daily, mobile maintenance units performed immediate roadside repairs. Mechanics rapidly developed a triage system. 15 minutes to fix a vehicle or push it off the road, cannibalizing parts from those deemed irreparable. Engines were swapped in a mere 45 minutes using specialized mobile cranes. When the designated Red Ball route became choked with traffic, drivers created alternate paths, commandeering French buses to move personnel and free up cargo trucks. They even pressed captured German vehicles into service, hastily painting them olive drab. Most critically, they built bypasses around destroyed bridges, utilizing rubble from bombed buildings as a rapid roadbed. The Germans, observing the seeming chaos that somehow produced relentless order, could not reconcile it with their own doctrine, which emphasized careful planning, rigid maintenance schedules, and proper procedures. The Americans violated every established principle, yet their system accelerated rather than collapsed. The most stunning revelation for German observers was the sheer stability of American fuel management. The 300,000 gallons consumed daily by the Express was more gasoline than many entire German armies received for all purposes. This was sustained by a parallel engineering marvel, Operation Pluto, the laying of fuel pipelines under the ocean across the English Channel. By September 1944, fuel flowed through these underwater pipes, a strategic resource German intelligence had failed to even detect. Forward fuel dumps, larger than German strategic reserves, were established every 25 miles along the route. Tanker trucks ran their own parallel convoy system, ensuring no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. General Major Walter Lemmet, observing aerial reconnaissance photographs, remarked with chilling clarity, "The Americans burn more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to entire panzer divisions." This isn't war as we understand it. It's industrial overflow. The Red Ball Express did not just supply patterns. It demonstrated the terrifying, unrestrained capacity of the American industrial machine. The logistical tempo of the Allied pursuit exponentially exceeded all established military calculation. German military doctrine, rooted in the principles of Blitzkrieg, calculated that an armored division could sustain a maximum daily advance of 20 to 30 miles under optimal conditions. Yet, the divisions under General George S. Patton, supplied relentlessly by the Red Ball Express, were averaging a staggering 40 to 60 miles daily, sustaining this pace for weeks on end. The pinnacle of this operational shock occurred on September 1st, 1944. The 4th Armored Division surged 35 miles during morning operations, halted precisely at noon for resupply, finding waiting Red Ball trucks laden with immediate fuel and ammunition, before advancing another 32 miles in the afternoon. This remarkable 67-mile single-day advance utterly shattered the German defensive planning framework, which was predicated entirely on the assumption of a maximum 30-mile daily penetration. Reviewing the initial combat reports from his headquarters in East Prussia, General Oberst Heinz Guderian initially refused to credit the accounts. No armored force can advance 60 miles daily for a week, he declared. Mechanical failures alone prevent it. This is propaganda or misidentification. But confirmation arrived through intercepted American radio traffic. More profoundly disturbing to German commanders was the realization that the Americans were broadcasting their positions openly, without code, demonstrating a supreme confidence rooted in their ability to maneuver faster than the Wehrmacht could possibly react. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had compiled comprehensive, chilling reports on the logistical juggernaut known as the Red Ball Express. The implications for Wehrmacht planning were catastrophic. Every fundamental assumption about American military capability required urgent revision. The report contained observations that actively defied established German military science. Americans wasted vehicles prodigiously, abandoning damaged trucks rather than undertaking time-consuming repairs. Drivers operated for days on stimulants, violating every principle of disciplined personnel management. There was virtually no camouflage discipline, making the entire system vulnerable to an air attack that, crucially, never materialized. Mechanical failure rates of 30% daily were simply overwhelmed by industrial redundancy and fuel consumption figures that would bankrupt any European nation's military budget. Field Marshal Walter Model's response to these findings crystallized a growing desperation within the German High Command. If these reports are accurate, he stated, we face not a superior army, but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they do not fear us. They waste resources because they possess infinite resources. We cannot defeat this with military tactics alone. The Red Ball Express drivers, however, paid a profound physical price invisible to German observers. Operating for up to 72 straight hours, often hallucinating from exhaustion and the effects of benzodrine, their dedication resulted in tragedy. 300 drivers were killed during the Red Ball's operational period, victims of collisions in heavy fog, overturned trucks on damaged roads, or fires ignited by overheated engines. Yet, morale remained extraordinarily high. These men, predominantly African Americans, denied equal rights in their homeland, understood the historical weight of their mission. With every mile driven and every ton delivered, they were proving Hitler's fundamental racial theories demonstrably wrong, providing an eloquent and undeniable testimony to the logistical power of the American arsenal. The scale of American logistics inflicted a deep psychological wound upon the Wehrmacht. Aust Hans von Luck, taken prisoner in September 1944, provided a searing assessment to his interrogators, stating, "We knew we lost when we understood your supply system. You violate every rule, waste fuel, abandon vehicles, exhaust drivers, yet succeed through sheer volume. You've industrialized warfare beyond our comprehension." This industrialized warfare manifested as an auditory and material assault. Wehrmacht soldiers were haunted by the constant, relentless sound of American trucks, roaring through the night, every night, signaling endless motors and inexhaustible supplies. While German frontline troops struggled with basic shortages, often rationing 3 rounds per rifle, the Americans were moving millions of rounds forward. The very sound of the engines became a sophisticated form of psychological warfare. The centerpiece of this logistical supremacy was the vehicle itself. German engineers were astonished by the GMCC CKW 21/2-ton truck, the celebrated backbone of the Red Ball Express, which represented the apex of mass production perfection. General Motors ultimately delivered over 500,000 of these vehicles by war's end, a staggering figure that exceeded the total number of all truck types possessed by the entire German military combined. The vehicles incorporated innovations the Germans had not yet fully implemented. All-wheel drive was standard, not the exception. They featured automatic tire inflation systems, waterproofing that permitted 30-inch fording, engines capable of running reliably on low-quality fuel without modification, and heaters that actually functioned in the brutal European winter. Perhaps more stunning was the revolutionary American maintenance philosophy, where German logistics mandated rebuilding engines and meticulously rationing parts. The Americans operated on a principle of rapid replacement, often discarding entire vehicles for minor problems if it meant avoiding downtime. While the Wehrmacht relied on a small corps of master mechanics, the Allies fielded thousands of competent mechanics capable of performing 80% of necessary repairs immediately. As the front lines rapidly shifted east, the Red Ball Express adapted with breathtaking speed that confounded German planning officers, who were accustomed to weeks of preparation for any major logistics change. When the original route to Chartres proved insufficient, American ingenuity birthed Red Ball Express extensions almost overnight. The White Ball Express from Rouen to Paris, the Green Diamond moving supplies from Cherbourg to critical railroad transfer points, the Red Line connecting Bayeux to Brussels, and the ABC route linking Antwerp, Brussels, and Charleroi. Crucially, each new route was operational within 48 hours of its conception, a feat that German staff officers required weeks to plan. The Americans simply painted new markers, assigned a rolling stock, and started moving cargo. Finally, the human element of the Red Ball Express created profound cognitive dissonance for German racial theorists. Nazi ideology declared black people inherently inferior, incapable of technical tasks, and lacking initiative. Yet, the predominance of African-American drivers was central to these logistics miracles that German forces could not match. These soldiers understood the bitter irony. They were fighting racism with truck keys, proving Hitler wrong with every mile driven, and defeating Nazi ideology through superior performance. German prisoners, sometimes forced to labor loading the Red Ball trucks, found their worldview utterly shattered by working alongside the men their regime had deemed subhuman. The operational success of the Red Ball Express rested on staggering paradoxes. African-American sergeants calculated complex weight distributions with an efficiency that baffled German engineers, men who, ironically, often spoke better English than the German instructors training Allied troops. These drivers and support personnel, despite the virulent racial ideology propagated by Nazi doctrine, treated their German prisoners of war with surprising and objective fairness. The sheer logistical infrastructure required for the Red Ball Express was something the Wehrmacht had explicitly deemed impossible to construct under active combat conditions. Yet, American engineers accomplished it, building or reinforcing 40 critical bridges, establishing 15 major fuel depots, creating 26 dedicated maintenance stations, and constructing 8 temporary cities to house thousands of drivers, all while the relentless operation continued unabated. This capacity for instantaneous action was perhaps best exemplified by the destruction of the bridge at Monte. German engineers had specifically demolished the structure to sever American supply lines, calculating that replacement would require a minimum of 6 weeks. American ingenuity shattered this timetable. Engineers erected a temporary bridge in just 14 hours, while Red Ball convoys were diverted only 8 meters onto hastily bulldozed bypass roads, flanking the destruction. German observers studying the American construction methods reported back to their command with unconcealed amazement. There were no lengthy planning meetings, no detailed blueprints, merely immediate, decisive action. The Americans were building infrastructure faster than the Germans could destroy it, materializing vital supply lines overnight across the fields of France. One achievement of the Red Ball Express particularly stunned German artillery officers: the sustained ammunition supply rates that dramatically exceeded their highest theoretical calculations for battlefield logistics. American artillery units enjoyed the unprecedented luxury of firing without restriction, a capability no German unit had possessed since 1942. During the intense reduction of the Met's fortifications in September 1944, the XDX Corps artillery fired a devastating 100,000 rounds within 24 hours. The Red Ball Express not only delivered every round required, but maintained a 20% surplus buffer. The disparity was overwhelming. German artillery defending Metz was strictly rationed to 50 rounds per gun per day. American guns fired continuously for hours, while opposing German officers calculated that such continuous bombardments demanded 50 truckloads of ammunition per hour, a volume the Red Ball provided without pause. This relentless pace consumed vehicles at rates that would have instantaneously paralyzed any other military force. By late September, mechanical attrition reached staggering proportions. The average vehicle life plummeted to 10,000 miles, contrasted sharply with a normal service life of 30,000 miles. The daily deadline rate reached 30% of all vehicles, necessitating the replacement of 500 engines and a consumption of 10,000 tires weekly. Over 5,000 vehicles were destroyed or abandoned. Yet, the operation never slowed. American industrial production had strategically anticipated such catastrophic losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports carrying hundreds of replacement trucks, and new drivers were trained in just 2 days before being thrust into the convoys. German calculations concluded that the Americans were destroying more trucks weekly than the entire Wehrmacht possessed in France. Yet, the American transport capacity increased rather than decreased. They had achieved what the Germans thought utterly impossible: logistics moving faster than battlefield consumption. French civilians along the Red Ball route witnessed firsthand a display of American abundance that fundamentally contradicted years of German occupation and austerity. The immediate psychological impact of this sudden abundance on occupied populations was profound. Red Ball Express drivers, many of them African Americans, frequently defied strict regulations to share their rations with French civilians. At every stop along the route, children would gather, receiving gifts of chocolate, soap, and even cigarettes from the drivers. This contrast with the German occupation was stark. Americans casually dispensed commodities that the Wehrmacht had strictly rationed for years. German intelligence immediately registered the monumental propaganda effect. Reports indicated that French civilians, citing the endless truck convoys as tangible proof, now viewed American victory as inevitable. Resistance activity, fueled by this perceived certainty, surged by 400% along the Red Ball corridors. A population that had grudgingly accepted German occupation now actively mobilized against it. By early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its most severe logistical crisis. General George S. Patton Jr.'s Third Army had advanced so rapidly that the round-trip distance now exceeded 700 miles, pushing the system past its breaking point. Drivers were collapsing from sheer exhaustion, and vehicles were disintegrating under the relentless strain. German intelligence quickly detected the operational stress. On September 8th, General der Panzertruppe Otto von Manchefeld reported critically, American supply lines show signs of collapse. Convoy intervals have increased from 5 to 15 minutes. Vehicle speed has decreased. This is our opportunity. Yet, the characteristic American genius for adaptability once again confounded the German high command. Within a staggering 72 hours, the Red Ball Express fundamentally reorganized. They implemented intermediate transfer points, slashing individual runs of 350 miles, established rigorous driver rotation systems and forward maintenance bases, and effectively doubled the number of assigned vehicles. By September 12th, tonnage delivery had not simply stabilized. It had actually increased. The crisis that should have paralyzed Patton's advance instead forged a stronger logistical apparatus. Supplementing the ground operation, the Americans implemented a second massive logistical solution that the Germans considered impossible: large-scale aerial supply. See, 47 transport aircraft began flying critical supplies directly to forward units, each carrying 3 tons of essential material. On September 16, 1944, astonished Wehrmacht observers counted 900 transport flights in a single day, delivering 2,700 tons by air. This effort dwarfed the Luftwaffe's maximum achievement of 300 tons daily during the peak effort at Stalingrad. The Americans utilized transport planes as if they were simply flying trucks, operated without concern for fighter escort or fuel limitations. They factored in potential losses and overwhelmed the enemy through sheer numerical superiority, demonstrating an industrial arithmetic with which the Wehrmacht simply could not compete. Furthermore, the Red Ball Express operated under decentralized command principles that fundamentally violated the rigid German military hierarchy. Junior officers routinely made critical decisions that, in the Wehrmacht, were reserved exclusively for general staff. Sergeants effectively commanded logistical operations larger than those typically managed by German colonels. This remarkable decentralization of authority baffled German observers. American logistics operated without a parent. The operational paradox that defined the Red Ball Express was its decentralized control. Where efficiency should have yielded to chaos, the initiative displayed by every lieutenant and sergeant ensured a logistical fluidity the rigidly hierarchical Wehrmacht could never match. By October 1944, the advance of Allied railheads began to reduce the Express's requirements. The operation, initially conceived to last just 10 days, had persisted for 82 days, delivering a total of 412,193 tons of supplies, over 222 million ton-miles. German commanders, now engaged in the desperate defense of their own borders, reflected grimly on the true nature of their defeat. Field Marshal Walter Model, in his final report, articulated this realization. We were not defeated by American tanks or planes primarily. We were defeated by American trucks. The Red Ball Express had irrevocably confirmed that, in the age of industrial warfare, logistics is strategy. The concurrent transition to rail transport was itself a marvel of engineering. American railroad engineers reconstructed 1,000 meters of destroyed French rail lines, often utilizing captured German equipment, laying new track faster than the retreating enemy could demolish it. The final statistics compiled for the Red Ball operation defied every German calculation of logistical possibility. 82 days of operation, for 112,193 tons of supplies delivered, 23,000 total drivers employed, a peak of 7,000 vehicles running simultaneously, and a staggering 700,000 gallons of fuel consumed daily. This effort delivered 40,000 tons of ammunition to Patton alone, alongside 15 million rations and 135,000 tons of medical supplies. Reviewing these figures in captivity, captured German officers admitted a profound failure in intelligence. They had calculated American logistical capacity based on European precedent, multiplying their own best performance by 3, and assumed that result represented the American maximum. They were ultimately wrong by a factor 10. Beyond the sheer tonnage and distance, the Red Ball Express achieved a more profound victory. It destroyed German faith in their own military superiority. Wehrmacht officers who had dismissed Americans as soft and mechanically dependent watched those same Americans achieve logistical miracles through relentless determination and industrial abundance. German prisoners of war stood silent at the fences of their camps, counting the passing Red Ball trucks, some weeping as they grasped the implication. Americans could waste more resources than Germany could produce. They were watching their worldview collapse, one truck at a time. Furthermore, the success of the Red Ball forced an unexpected racial reckoning within the segregated American military. The operation depended overwhelmingly on African American soldiers, who were still systematically denied equal treatment and barred from combat roles. General Eisenhower, visiting the Red Ball operations in September 1944, witnessed this stark contradiction firsthand, an observation his aide, Captain Harry Butcher, dutifully recorded. The relentless commitment of these logistics troops, often colored drivers who had been operating for 20 hours or more without respite, drew immediate and critical attention. As one observer noted, "These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to reconsider many things." This undeniable success applied immense pressure toward integration, directly contributing to the eventual military desegregation that followed 3 years later. African American soldiers had conclusively proven in the crucible of France what they had always known. Given the necessary tools and opportunity, their capability would match any adversaries. The Red Ball Express was their unique form of combat, and they won it decisively. The operational reality presented a profound contradiction that German racial theorists struggled desperately to reconcile. So overwhelming was the evidence of the Red Ball's efficiency that official SS racial science publications simply ceased all mention of American logistics operations. The facts were too damaging to acknowledge, too overwhelming to deny. Nevertheless, German military engineers studied the Red Ball Express operations intensively after the war's conclusion, realizing that the lessons gleaned would revolutionize global logistics thinking. Their analysis confirmed that volume overcomes inefficiency, mechanical redundancy eliminates vulnerability, decentralized execution enables speed, and standardization multiplies capability. Crucially, they learned that while human endurance has limits, those bounds were far higher than previously assumed. General Franz Halder, the former chief of the German General Staff, encapsulated the strategic reversal in 1950, writing, "The Red Ball Express proved logistics determined strategy, not vice versa." Americans understood this. We learned it too late. Among the 23,000 Red Ball drivers, countless individual stories of staggering heroism emerged, accounts verified meticulously within military records that Germans found fundamentally incomprehensible within their rigid military framework. Corporal John L. Houston, for instance, drove continuously for 48 hours, ensuring the crucial delivery of ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division near Cambrai. Though he succumbed to exhaustion and fell asleep at the wheel 3 times, he was revived by his fellow drivers and pressed on until the mission was complete. Private Booker T. Washington's truck, carrying vital medical supplies, caught fire from overheated brakes. Defying procedure, which mandated abandoning the burning vehicle, he drove the Inferno 2 miles directly into a field hospital, leaping out only as the flames consumed the cab. The supplies he saved ultimately treated wounded soldiers from both Allied and Axis forces. These multiplying thousands of stories revealed to observing Germans the core tenets of American military culture: individual initiative, calculated risk-taking, and the unwavering prioritization of mission accomplishment over strict regulatory compliance. Desperate to counter the logistical dominance, German forces attempted to create their own version of the Red Ball Express in late 1944. Operation Greif, executed during the Battle of the Bulge, included specific plans to utilize captured American trucks to establish German supply lines. The effort failed immediately and comprehensively. German drivers could not maintain the relentless American speeds. German mechanics lacked the proficiency to repair unfamiliar American equipment quickly enough. Furthermore, German fuel supplies could not sustain the necessary consumption rates. Most fundamentally, the German command structure could not replicate the American attitude of unlimited resources and decentralized authority. The officer commanding the operation reported on the systemic failure, confirming that the very attitude which fueled the Red Ball could not be replicated. The logistical chasm between the warring powers was never clearer than in the fate of captured equipment. When German forces seized 50 American trucks, 30 were quickly rendered unusable, deadline due to minor mechanical failures or lack of parts. The Americans, conversely, simply replaced their losses. This fundamental difference, the German reliance on meticulous repair versus the American capacity for industrial replacement, provides concise explanation for the ultimate defeat of the Wehrmacht. The Red Ball Express faced its ultimate reckoning during the brutal winter of 1944 to 1945. Conventional German military doctrine explicitly stated that wheel logistics became impossible below -10 degrees Celsius, arguing that freezing rain, snow, and thick ice would inevitably stop all transport. Yet, the Red Ball Express continued its relentless advance. Drivers battled the elements, wrapping thick chains on the tires and pouring raw alcohol into radiators to prevent seizing. Although speeds plummeted from 35 miles per hour down to a grueling 15, the tonnage delivered never faltered. German observers, in disbelief, reported seeing ice-covered convoys moving stubbornly through blizzards that had successfully immobilized entire panzer divisions. The United States had engineered a logistics system that functioned regardless of weather, inhospitable terrain, or concentrated enemy action. It was a system that, while perhaps lacking the elegance prized by German efficiency experts, proved completely unstoppable. The scale of this industrial warfare was so staggering that, In May 1945, captured German logistics officers were formally required to study Red Ball Express operations for the historical record. Their conclusions were unanimous and delivered a devastating blow to German military pride. General der Infanterie Friedrich Schultz summarized the American achievement with stark clarity. The Red Ball Express represents warfare we never imagined. Americans created a temporary civilization. Thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, millions of tons of supplies that existed only to feed armies, then dissolved when no longer needed. He concluded that while Germany focused on building permanent infrastructure over years, the Americans created superior temporary systems in mere days. Perhaps the most profound analysis came from General Heightened, often regarded as the father of German armored warfare. We invented blitzkrieg, Heightened reflected, but we never solved its fundamental limitation, logistics. He argued that the Americans had solved this challenge through an industrial excess that the German mind deemed impossible. For Heightened, the Red Ball Express was not merely a supply line, but a flowing river material that drowned our forces. The sheer cost of the operation, approximately $100 million in 1944, accounting for destroyed vehicles, massive fuel consumption, road damage, and French claims of damages, was incomprehensible to German staff officers accustomed to managing severe scarcity. Yet, for the Americans, this figure was considered cheap. This logistical effort enabled the capture of 400,000 German soldiers, directly facilitated the liberation of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and is estimated to have shortened the war by 6 months. Given that each day of conflict cost America roughly $250 million, the Red Ball Express essentially paid for an entire operational budget in a single day of shortened conflict. Lieutenant General John C.H. Lee, who commanded logistics for the European theater, famously stated the industrial calculus. We wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France. In any previous war, that would be catastrophic losses. In American industrial war, it's acceptable overhead. Beyond its immediate military victory, an unexpected and powerful consequence of the Red Ball Express was its revolutionary impact, laying the foundation for modern post-war civilian logistics systems. The logistical expertise forged on the roads of France was not abandoned upon the war's conclusion. Thousands of American drivers returned home, seasoned by operating the world's largest transportation network, and immediately became the architects of the modern American logistics industry, founding powerhouses like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways. These companies were initiated by Red Ball veterans who applied the harsh lessons of military logistics directly to civilian commerce, internalizing a doctrine learned under fire. That volume decisively beats efficiency, that relentless speed triumphs over perfection, and that the ability to keep trucks rolling 24 hours a day grants the power to move the world. Military historians universally recognize the Red Ball Express as a single decisive logistics operation of the European theater. Without this constant flow of material, General Patton's aggressive advance would have culminated prematurely. The liberation of Paris would have been delayed by weeks, and German forces would have successfully established impregnable winter defensive lines. The operation fundamentally validated American military doctrine, which prioritized industrial capacity and supply chain integrity over pure tactical brilliance. While German officers meticulously studied Clausewitz and the art of battlefield maneuver, their American counterparts focused on the lessons of Detroit assembly lines and precise railroad timetables. The Red Ball Express unequivocally demonstrated that in modern industrial warfare, the ability to supply forces determines victory far more than mere tactical genius. This catastrophic realization dawned upon the German High Command in the West. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundert, supreme German commander in the West, received comprehensive intelligence reports detailing the scope and scale of the Red Ball Express. After hours spent studying the overwhelming data, he summoned his staff. "Gentlemen," he announced with chilling clarity, "we face something beyond military solution. The Americans have created a supply system that renders distance irrelevant. Our entire strategy assumed their culminating point, the moment when advancing forces inevitably outrun their supplies. That point," he concluded, "does not exist. They have revolutionized warfare, and we are fighting the last war." When his operations officer, Obus Hanspedel, fatalistically suggested interdicting the Red Ball routes using the remaining assets of the Luftwaffe. Von Runich's response revealed a complete and devastating understanding of the enemy's industrial power. With what shall we interdict, he countered. They operate 6,000 trucks. Even if we could destroy 1,000, which we cannot, they would replace them in a week. We would need to destroy 200 trucks daily simply to match their production rate. We do not possess 200 aircraft total. Yet, behind the cold statistics and calculations of material, the German observers witnessed human stories that revealed the true character of the American fighting man. These were drivers who refused relief after 3 days without sleep, fearful that their specific truck might not make the next run. Teenagers who had lied about their age to enlist, working relentlessly as mechanics in freezing rain to keep the convoys rolling. These stories, multiplied across the entire operation, created a powerful mythology that profoundly demoralized the Wehrmacht. The Americans were not the soft enemies depicted in German propaganda. They drove themselves harder than German soldiers drove their horses, but they did so voluntarily, motivated by commitment rather than fear. This voluntary, self-imposed brutality made them infinitely more dangerous than German doctrine had ever accounted for. The Red Ball Express thus became unintentional propaganda, a mechanical, unstoppable force far more powerful than any planned psychological operation. German soldiers could hear the low, endless rumble of the convoys approaching. The Red Ball Express functioned as a relentless psychological weapon. Under the cover of night, the endless, grinding roar of thousands of motors became an instrument of demoralization. German field units repeatedly reported hearing ghost convoys, phantom streams of traffic that never materialized but eroded morale as effectively as actual logistical shortages. The crushing realization that American forces possessed virtually limitless reserves, while German soldiers desperately rationed their final round of ammunition, created an inescapable despair that undermined combat effectiveness across the Western Front. Recognizing this devastating psychological impact, specialized American warfare units began intentionally broadcasting the sounds of truck engines toward enemy lines, even when the routes were empty. The resulting German reports of these phantom convoys confirmed the profound psychological damage inflicted by the very concept of the Red Ball Express. Though the Express was officially discontinued in November 1944, after rail lines were partially restored, its methods had fundamentally revolutionized military logistics forever. The core concept, the deployment of continuous, high-volume, and admittedly wasteful supply chains, was immediately codified into permanent American military doctrine. Perhaps the most striking innovation was the speed of the operation's dissolution. This massive enterprise, involving 23,000 men, nearly 6,000 vehicles, and hundreds of temporary installations, vanished in a mere 72 hours. Troops were swiftly reassigned, the vast fleet of vehicles redistributed, and the vital routes immediately returned to civilian use. An astonishing efficiency that stood in stark contrast to the German command, which required months to construct smaller operations and often years to dissolve them. The American paradigm was clear. Build what is needed, use it decisively, discard it rapidly, and prepare to build something superior. When the high command of the Wehrmacht finally surrendered in May 1945, many captured generals specifically cited the Red Ball Express as the ultimate demonstration of the hopelessness of continued resistance. General der Panzertruppe Otto von Manschenfeld stated plainly during his interrogation, "When we understood your logistics capacity, we knew the war was lost. You could supply armies faster than we could destroy them. The Red Ball Express was a weapon against which we had no defense." Similarly, when Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, one of Germany's most competent commanders, was asked what element of the American forces most surprised him, his answer was neither the tanks nor the aircraft, but the trucks. He recognized that the Red Ball Express signified the militarization of America's entire societal production capacity. We were fighting your factories, not just your soldiers. The final, staggering statistics of the Red Ball Express serve as a permanent testament to the overwhelming power of industrial warfare. Over its 82 days of operation, the Express delivered a total cargo of 412,193 tons, covering 122 million ton-miles. This required a daily peak of 7,000 trucks and the tireless labor of 23,000 drivers. The cost approached $100 million, consuming 57 million gallons of fuel, wearing out 180,000 tires, and resulting in the destruction of over 5,000 vehicles. Crucially, military analysts estimate that the logistical advantage provided by the Red Ball Express contributed to the defeat of 47 German divisions and potentially shortened the war by 180 days. These figures transcend mere military operations. They mark the definitive moment when modern warfare transitioned, confirming that industrial capacity had become the ultimate strategic weapon. The success of the Allied blitzkrieg across France hinged not merely on tactical brilliance, but on a fundamental redefinition of warfare, where logistics became the primary determinant of strategy rather than its servant. 5 decades later, the profound importance of this effort finally received its due public acknowledgement. In 1994, coinciding with the 50th anniversary of the D-Day landings, the United States Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring the legendary Red Ball Express during a ceremony held at the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. This event recognized an operation often overshadowed by the drama of combat, yet demonstrably decisive in securing the Allied victory. Veterans attending the ceremony spoke movingly of their immense pride in an endeavor that showcased not only American industrial capacity, but also individual, unrelenting determination against overwhelming odds. These drivers, predominantly African-American soldiers, often segregated, subject to systemic discrimination, and denied proper recognition during the conflict itself, had battled through extreme exhaustion, relentless mechanical failures, and weather conditions severe enough to immobilize armored divisions. Yet, they had delivered victory, mile after arduous mile, maintaining an average speed of 35 miles per hour. The Red Ball Express offered definitive proof that in the crucible of modern mechanized warfare, supply is no mere support function. It is emphatically the main effort. The operation became the clearest demonstration that an industrial democracy could mobilize and deploy resources on a staggering scale that the lauded efficiency of the totalitarian German state simply could not match. German generals, who had initially mocked American logistical capabilities, were swiftly silenced by the spectacle of 6,000 trucks surging forward, delivering an astonishing 12,500 tons of material daily across 700 miles of newly liberated French terrain. The Wehrmacht command had erroneously assumed that the Americans would adhere to cautious European military precedent, conserving resources and advancing deliberately. Instead, the Allies unleashed a logistical tsunami that utterly drowned the German defenses in an overwhelming abundance of fuel, ammunition, and rations. The triumph of the Red Ball Express stemmed not from abstract military genius, but from uniquely American characteristics the Germans failed to grasp: industrial excess, deep mechanical aptitude, exceptional improvisational skill, and, critically, the profound initiative of individual soldiers empowered to make independent decisions that, within the rigid structure of the Wehrmacht, would have required the direct approval of a field marshal. General George S. Patton, whose Third Army was the primary and most aggressive beneficiary of the Red Ball Express's relentless tempo, enshrined their contribution in his memoirs with the ultimate tribute. Patton asserted that the truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserved as much credit for the defeat of Germany as any combat unit. He reiterated the hardships faced. They drove through exhaustion, to mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. Without them, the Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were black soldiers, mostly segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition, but they won the war as surely as any rifleman. History must record this truth. That truth stands as the indelible final testament. 23,000 mostly African-American drivers, operating 6,000 trucks on a one-way highway to victory, achieved what German military science had declared physically impossible. They supplied rapidly advancing armies faster than physics suggested they should, maintain an operational tempo that defied human endurance, and demonstrated conclusively that in modern global conflict, the side with the most trucks will inevitably defeat the side relying solely on the best tactics. Initially, the seasoned German high command greeted the American logistical efforts with open derision, dismissing the concept as chaotic, undisciplined, and fundamentally unsustainable. Yet, a mere 82 days after the Red Ball Express began its ceaseless operation, those same generals found themselves signing surrender documents, finally grasping profound truth. American industrial abundance, mobilized and delivered by trucks, had decisively overwhelmed perceived German military excellence. While the Red Ball Express officially ceased operations on November 16, 1944, its revolutionary impact resonated permanently through the doctrines of modern warfare. It irrevocably established that, in the industrial age conflict, the true measure of military might lay not solely with the valor of the soldiers or the brilliance of the generals, but with the capacity of the nation to project overwhelming supply volume at speed across vast distances. The German commanders who scoffed at American logistics in August 1944 were ultimately defeated by May 1945 by the relentless efficiency of 23,000 dedicated truck drivers who fundamentally redefined the scale of ground warfare, maintaining an operational pace of 35 miles per hour. Though often neither elegant nor conventionally efficient, the operation's sheer efficacy kept the Allied momentum rolling, ensuring continued, rapid retreat of German forces. The physical infrastructure of France still bears the indelible scars of this unprecedented effort. Ruts worn deep by chronically overloaded trucks, hastily repaired bridges, and the detritus of abandoned vehicles lining the route. But the most significant monument to the Red Ball Express is the accelerated timeline of Allied victory. The operation shortened the European conflict by critical months, saving countless lives. The German generals learned the definitive, crushing lesson of modern warfare, that while amateurs focus on tactics, true professionals master logistics. America spoke this truth loudly, powered by the continuous roar of 6,000 engines that hauled the necessary instruments of destruction and democracy down a one-way path to victory at 35 miles per hour. The final, most telling commentary on the operation comes from an unnamed German officer, recorded by a Red Ball driver during the 1994 commemoration. While standing captive beside a Belgian roadway, witnessing the seemingly infinite line of American transport vehicles, the officer confessed in accented English to his captors, "We prepared for everything. Your tanks, your planes, your ships. We never prepared for your trucks." He summarized the Axis failure with a chilling question: how do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers? The answer continued to roll past him at relentless 5-minute intervals, driven by exhausted Americans who were fundamentally rewriting the foundational rules of mechanized warfare, one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express had transformed the mundane act of supply into strategic genius, elevating the transport truck to arguably the most decisive weapon of the European war. The German High Command ceased their derision only when this operational reality became undeniable, but by then, General Patton's advance was already irreversible, sustained by the greatest, most unrelenting logistics operation in military history.